Yeah.
I gotta keep
Well,
thinking this about
they clear cut either way.
I'm looking forward to going.
They have no tree protection requirement.
Thank you.
They do for that increase, the
Yeah.
increased site design.
Yes. But they don't
Yeah, I'd
for
like to get at least
regular
the most
They
site
can
development.
choose a tree retention or a tree planting. So nothing, you're correct, nothing prevents them from clear cutting or just planting.
What they may do to,
I see Rick and Richard and Nancy Green. I see the Rices.
hey, don't be mad.
I see Carol Crazy Burner.
Oh, no.
The county
Come
has
on,
four
Ed.
people here. So Ben Ryden, Adam, Mark, and Tara. I don't. Huh? No. Have you see Chuck?
Oh, so much for that.
All the development communities represented. I saw all of them. And
Thing.
I think we'll expect Bob to speak when he hadn't spoken before. Trying to think who else is in there. Historic Madison Coalition is calling on 15 minutes.
Is there going to be a
I don't
police officer
consider
here?
their license and duty
Good evening.
part of that crowd.
Just like to take a moment to welcome each of you to our council meeting this evening and our zoning hearing. It's always good to see our citizens come into our meetings and express their concerns, so we are excited that you are here with us this evening. And I would ask, first of all, before we go to our prayer, that as each of you come to the podium to speak, I would ask that you respect each other's comments that they make tonight. And just remember that you are talking to our staff, who will not make the decision tonight, but our council will make the decision tonight from this meeting. And I would ask you to also respect our council members as well. I would also ask if you have cell phones to please turn them off at this time. At this time, we'll have pledge of allegiance by Councilmember Blanton and prayer by Mayor Pro Tem Reed.
If you would like to pray with us, would you please remain standing? Dear God, we gather today as leaders in our community to make decisions that impact the lives of our citizens. We ask for your guidance and wisdom. We ask that you allow us to work together to build a better future for our city. Help us to listen to each other's perspectives, to consider the needs of all, and to make decisions that promote the common good. Grant us the courage to stand for what is right, the compassion to care for those in need, and the wisdom to make choices that benefit our community. We pray for unity, for respect, and for a spirit of cooperation that brings us together for the good of all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Our clerk will record that all our council members are present tonight, and we are here for a special zoning hearing tonight. And because it's a special zoning hearing, I've asked our city attorney if he would to lead and guide us further in this hearing tonight.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The subsequent public hearing procedure will be followed. First, staff will provide a report. Following the staff report, anyone wishing to speak in support of the city-initiated amendments, once acknowledged, may address the proposed amendments from the podium. We ask that you begin by stating your name, address, interests, campaign contributions, and/or gifts to council members. After hearing from all supporters, anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the city-initiated amendments, once acknowledged, may address the proposed amendments from the podium. Because of the importance of these amendments to the future health, safety, and welfare of the city of Madison, as well as the time and consideration given by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the general public to date, the mayor would like to ask the council if they'd be willing to increase the total time limit to 20 minutes per side and 3 minutes per individual. Is everybody in agreement
That's
up there?
agreeable with that, council?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Each individual except the applicant or designated representative of a group may speak only once for no more than 3 minutes. City staff may then make a brief summary remarks using any reserved time, after which the public hearing will be closed. All supporters will be allowed a 20-minute combined total time limit. Likewise, all opponents will be allowed a 20-minute combined total time limit. Due to the amount of public comment received to date, both written and verbal, which the council has reviewed in detail, and in an effort to allow as many people to speak as possible, the mayor and council ask that the comments remain brief. Please refrain from repeating comments that have been previously submitted or that are voiced during tonight's public hearing. At the close of the public hearing, the council will deliberate and may take action. Council members will hold all questions for staff, supporters, and opponents until that time. Please remember the city of Madison is a city of civility. As such, all discourse should remain civil and be directed solely at to the mayor.
Thank you so much, sir. At this time, we're going to call Molly. If you would come to the podium, you can sit where you are if you have a microphone there.
All right, Ken's going to pull up my presentation. I ask that you bear with me. It's dry. It's a little bit long in the beginning, but I'll try and go as quickly as possible. It does follow the memorandum that you all have had to review. So I'll try and skip some of the details, but know that this is all from the memorandum that you all have. So some context. As you all know, the moratorium was enacted on January 8th for zoning actions within the I-1 and I-2 zoning districts. This was done in part because of increased interest in annexation into the city by property owners south of I-20, as well as some portions of our ordinance having not been adjusted for the better part of 2 decades. Some general concepts to keep in mind as we go article through article. The types of developments the city is seeking: small to medium scale industrial developments providing approximately 100 skilled jobs, is illustrated through those dimensional requirement and land use proposals. To balance some of the reduction in the size, the types of permitted uses were expanded. And then we did add this conditional use threshold. So permitted uses exceeding certain thresholds, specifically related to transportation and utilities, require a conditional use, providing you with that increased oversight. Okay, so for all of these, we're going to go article by article. I'm going to flip forward 3 so you can see how that's organized. You'll see the amendments. So this is the initial proposal issued March 7th, I believe. We'll itemize those bullet by bullet. Then we'll go into the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendations, itemizing those major or key recommendations. And then we'll go into additional considerations, and you might wonder what that is. So staff typically doesn't provide recommendations to city-initiated items because we drafted the city-initiated item itself. So we're not providing a recommendation on top of that necessarily. However, based on conversations that we have either had or heard during the last several months, and responding to that feedback that we have received from all parties involved in this process, we are proffering some additional considerations that perhaps bridge the gap between what was proposed and what the Planning Commission has recommended in addition to the feedback we've received. So I'm going to go back here. We can go through Article 2, the initial amendment. Obsolete definitions were removed. All new definitions corresponding to the North American Industry Classification System were added. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended alterations to the shopping center definition. That was really just for clarity's sake. removing the city transportation official definition. That corresponds to the recommendation related to the traffic impact analysis, which I'll go over in a moment. But removal of that section removed the need for a city transportation official definition. It doesn't appear anywhere else in the ordinance. As well as adding the industrial complex definition. That should have been added as part of our initial proposal. It was left out. It was an oversight, so they did elect to include that. It is basically a mirror of the shopping center definition and is part of that section. Additional considerations, there are none, as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Article 3, the initial amendment, removal of C5, heavy commercial district, replacing it with that new light industrial district, or I. Removal of all use of the term commercial within those industrial zoning districts. That's really to guide industrial land uses to our industrial zoning districts and make sure that all commercial uses are guided to our commercial zoning districts. There are no Planning and Zoning Commission recommendations. Therefore, there are no additional considerations as proposed. Article 5, the existing interstate buffer was increased and a scenic buffer was added along State Route 83. Existing performance standards were moved all to Section 580 for ease of use. They were really not changed considerably or substantively, but all placed in one area so that they were easily found. Existing commercial standards, again, combined, and then that traffic impact analysis section was added detailing the purpose, applicability, and required contents. I want to be very clear. This traffic impact analysis section was not the requirement for said analysis. It was simply providing a template for the development of one when the requirement was made. So the Planning Commission recommended removal of the scenic buffer, altering minimally language related to performance standards, and then removal of that section 585, that's the traffic impact analysis. You'll notice what, a little bit later, what they used to replace that with, but I want to be very clear again, removal of that section does not remove the requirement for an analysis. They simply switch that out for a state template, which I'll go over in just a moment. Additional considerations as recommended by the PZC with the following condition: approval of proposed section 550.3 subsection 5, that's our scenic buffer, with the first sentence to read, a scenic buffer must be maintained along both sides of State Route 83 south of I-20 and I-1 and I-2 only. So that's just clarification. Again, that should have been made as part of the first proposal, but we're clarifying that now. I want to be clear about that buffer. It is not in addition to a setback. It is simply within the setback, so it's not requiring additional land be taken from a property, simply that it be vegetated, or that the vegetation that is there remain. All right, Article 6, removing all language related to C5, adding language related to I, creating a new land use table corresponding to those NAICS codes, adding that threshold, that conditional use threshold, and the memorandum will provide that rationale for how we came up with those numbers in terms of the thresholds that were identified in the initial proposal. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that we add all NAICS codes to Section 630.3 Table 8. That was primarily for your benefit to see what had been left out so you could fully assess all the different potential land uses and make sure that there was nothing that you felt was appropriate within these zoning districts to be added back. Adding services to buildings and dwellings, NAICS 5617 as a permitted use in I-1. Adding general warehousing and storage, NAICS 49311 as a conditional use in I-2. And altering that conditional use threshold, that's Note 1 in Notes for Table 8, Section 630.3, to any permitted use that is subject to SARA Title III, anticipates the generation of 750 or more annual average daily traffic, and or anticipates the generation of 170 or more annual average daily truck traffic, requires a conditional use permit. I want to note that this does not include thresholds for water usage or wastewater production. And then again, altering language in 650.4 for clarity. That's a minimal non-substantive change. Additional considerations as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission with the following changes. Removal of those NAICS codes. I'm not going to list all of those out there that were added for you to view, unless there is a NAICS code that you would like to add to there. And then alternate 1 on notes for Table 8, Section 630.3 to read, any permitted use that is 1, subject to SARA Title III, 2, anticipates the generation of 300 or more jobs, 3, anticipates the generation of 50 or more annual average daily truck traffic for vehicles in classes 4 through 13 in the Federal Highway Administration's 13 category vehicle classification system, 4, anticipates the use of 100,000 or more gallons of water per day, and or 5, anticipates the production of 100,000 or more gallons of wastewater per day, requires a conditional use permit. This was developed by myself and Aaron Wadley. Article 7, the proposed amendment. The dimensional requirements were altered to encourage specific scales of development. I want to be very clear, we were intentionally trying to create zones in which small, medium, and larger scale development could occur. Existing businesses, such as Mannington Mills, the new one on State Route 83, were used to create those dimensional thresholds. You have a chart where we have actually pulled what we call a sort of a benchmark and then a check to show you where existing buildings are on the ground right now in terms of their dimensional requirements. The buffer between industrial and commercial was increased, and a buffer between industrial and residential, including those outside city limits, was added. And again, as I mentioned, that memorandum provides you additional detail. The recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission were removing lot area, lot width, and building floor area minimums, changing the front yard setback minimum to 100 feet in I1, and I2, and increasing the building floor area maximum in I to 50,000 square feet, in I1 to 100,000 square feet, and I2 to 500,000 square feet. Some additional considerations as recommended with the following changes. Approve the lot area minimum in I1 as proposed at 5 acres. Decrease the lot area minimum in I2 to 10 acres. You might wonder why that is. We are trying to sort of calibrate the building size with the lot area itself. So with some additional knowledge that we gained over the course, again, we're taking in feedback, we're trying to make changes, trying to make sure that this makes sense and is usable. We did suggest that you sort of alter those, again, just to calibrate the building square footage with the acreage. Approve the lot area maximum in I2 as proposed, 75 acres. And then alter the building floor area maximum in I2 to read 0 to 250,000 square feet. You'll see note 9 right below there, permitted by right. And then 251,000 to 500,000 square feet, note 10, must comply with section 860.3. And we'll go over what 860.3 is in just a moment, but those are heightened site design requirements. So Article 8, the proposed amendment, permitted uses with the industrial complexes were updated to correspond to those new NAICS codes, so nothing substantive there. And then a list of additional required reports and plans citing national baselines or state baselines also was added for conditional use applications. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended altering language in Section 832 to correspond to changes made in Section 630.3 Table 8, and then change language to correspond to changes to Sections 585 and Note 1 in Notes for Table 8, Section 630.0, and that's specifically referencing that Georgia Department of Transportation's Design Policy Manual and altering those conditional use thresholds that were listed there, again, just referencing what was in the notes for Table 8, Section 630. The Georgia Department of Transportation's Design Policy Manual was found after we proposed the initial amendments. It was actually something we were looking for in the beginning, which is a state or national template that we could look to. So it was a planning department recommendation that we do remove that traffic impact analysis section. It just creates longer code. And using that as a reference point, it's a state document. It gets updated regularly. It is a standard, it's a professional standard that most traffic engineers would use. So we feel like it is more than adequate to meet our needs. Additional consideration, change section 860.1 to read plans for the mitigation of the excessive use of water and or wastewater capacity as defined by the Building and Zoning Administrator if anticipated to use or generate, and then it cites those 100,000 or more gallons of water and wastewater. And then change language in section 860.12 to read traffic study as defined by GDOT's Design Policy Manual if anticipated to include or generate, and then it cites those standards again that we noted in Table 8. Add section 860.2 to read section 860.2 industrial complexes, see section 833.4. Again, that was a little bit of an oversight, just trying to clean things up and make sure we're cross-referencing where we need to. And then add section 860.3. Ken is going to jump over to the memorandum so we can take a look at that. I realize it's pretty small. This is available online, however. I just wanted to kind of walk through where these came from, what these look like. Based on, again, the public hearing, the last public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission and feedback we've received then and since then, we wanted to look at what we could do in terms of still providing a by right up to 500,000, but getting some height and site design requirements when we get into those higher building square footages. So we've actually looked to South Face Institute. It's an Atlanta-based planning firm, an environmental firm. They have what is the precursor to LEED Earthcraft standards, and we pulled out 2 of those standards that relate to stormwater management and tree either retention or planting. And we've really just pulled those over. They haven't been changed in terms of the requirements from that document to what we're seeing here. I won't necessarily go into the details unless you would like me to, but again, it's just about having more water infiltration into the land on site. That's how we get better stormwater management, and it's about retaining a certain amount of trees and planting a certain amount of trees on site. There is an alternative compliance measure there. If the property owner does not wish to comply with that, they can pay into what's called a green space fund. It's pretty general in terms of what it can be used for, but it in the past has been used for green space purchase, tree planting, etc. And it was offered for commercial redevelopment. So that's not a new thing that we're adding. It's already in the alternative compliance measures within our commercial districts. You'll primarily see those be used along 441. All right, we can go back. Yeah, we can just kind of scroll down. So that's where it starts. You'll see stormwater management, subsection 1. Then you'll go down, you'll see tree retention and planting, and then you'll notice they can select either A or B. A is tree retention. If you go down to B, it's tree planting. You can keep going down. And then there's the alternative compliance. There we go. So then you see subsection 3, alternative compliance. The following options are available. And that allows them to elect doing stormwater, alternative compliance for stormwater, and or alternative compliance for tree retention and planting. So it allows for a little bit of flexibility for both of those. All right, if you could go back to the presentation. All right, so what I wanted to do was pull out what I think are those areas for maybe increased consideration by you all. I think there's a lot here that the Planning Commission has spent a lot of time reviewing and assessing, and I think is in a good place. And perhaps these sections are something that you want to give a little bit more time to and a little bit more consideration of. So I wanted to pull these out to focus some of that discussion. Of course, if there's anything else that you want to look at, I'm happy to answer any questions. But these are the areas I wanted to direct your attention. So Article 5, that's scenic buffer. Whether it's something you do or do not want to approve, if there's any changes you want to make to that. Again, that's section 550.3, subsection 5. Article 6, those conditional use thresholds, what you want them to look like, what the maximums are, what the types of thresholds are, as well as what the specific number is. And that's section 630.3, table 8, note 1. Article 7, specifically the I2 dimensional requirements, section 700.3, table 13, that lot area minimum. I talked about how we were sort of calibrating that with the building size. And then that building floor area maximum. Of course, it was proposed at 200,000. It was recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission at 500,000. And we proffered you maybe an alternative that meets that objective of managing our land a little bit better, but allowing for that increased size. And then Article 8, those I2 additional site development requirements, if they are requirements that you feel are appropriate, if different ones need to be proposed, or if they need to be there at all. And again, that's proposed section 860.3. And that is all from me. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and let me just say this, our council have received correspondence, as I said earlier, from a lot of our landowners, developers here, and also other letters from special interest citizens here as well. So at this time, we're going to open our public hearing. I think each side gets 20 minutes. And I would ask repeatedly, don't repeat the same thing. If someone has already said something, you don't have to go back and repeat what someone has said. But just know that this council will certainly have a listening ear this evening. And at that, we're going to open our public hearing. And those who are here who are for this tax change, if you will come to the podium and state your name, who you are.
Mayor, could we let the citizens standing in the back know we got a big empty row in the front, if you're all willing to get up there?
It seems like they prefer the back, so.
Evidently.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Annie Hunt Burris, and I live at 912 Dixie Avenue. I have come to a number of the planning and zoning meetings and watched with great interest what's going on, and I'll tell you why. You're talking about traffic, you're talking about utilities, and you're talking about economic development. This is my background. For context to the content, I have a federal highway fellowship to go to Georgia Tech, and I got my master's in city planning, civil engineering, focused on energy use. And then I fell into the governor's office doing budgets for economic development and community development and forestry. Then I got really lucky 40 years ago, back when my hair was really brown, to be among the first 2 women hired by the state of Georgia to do economic development across Georgia. So I did industrial development, headquarters, R&D, and distribution. Had a lot of fun, and one of my mentors said, you need to understand it's different on the local level. So Mr. Pat Patillo said, you need to go local. So I went to DeKalb County and did that for several years, and then I got recruited by Georgia Power to do economic development. And then they made me do their electric vehicle program, start that up for them. And then I was loaned by them to help Zell Miller figure out how to do joint development authorities. So I was very much involved in setting the parameters for Stanton Springs. And it was originally no big boxes, no heavy industry. It was to be about R&D. Because if you think about what's distinctive about here, we really are the Research Triangle Park area of Georgia compared to North Carolina. Atlanta, Athens, Augusta, I-20, Madison's right in the middle. And then I did it for the university system. And it ain't bragging if you done it. I got named Honorary Life for Economic Development for the state of Georgia. The bottom line is you're talking about traffic and utilities and building size. I'd like to commend you for a lot of the traffic efforts you've got underway. But the reason for economic development and industrial development is to create tax digest. I would like to respectfully say that this community is doing very well already with its tax base, and it also has very good jobs. We became a part of Metro Atlanta, Metropolitan Statistical Area 3 years ago, because most of our people...
20 seconds remaining.
Oh, darn. Okay. Well, the bottom line is don't mess up a good location, because if you're going to go to the higher level of Research Triangle Park, which there is a lot of movement going on behind the scenes at the state level to support that, Madison is a jewel, and let's keep it right.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it seems like, Ms. Burrell, I just want to make sure the record is straight. You were against these text amendments? Are you just against traffic?
It was
or-
4.
4. Good deal. So, thank you. Right. Anyone else here to speak for this text change?
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm Steve Whitcomb, live at 805 Old Post Road, and quite frankly, I don't know whether I'm speaking for or against it, but I will say my piece. First, I'd like to congratulate the staff. This is obviously a thorough piece of work. I got to admit that I understand my Verizon bill more than I do a lot of what in those 130 pages, but well done. I know you cautioned, Mr. Mayor, not to talk about repeat things, but I think it bears repeating. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the movie Field of Dreams, a baseball movie with Kevin Costner, and he builds a baseball field because he hears a voice saying, "Build it and they will come." And sure enough, he did. And the last scene is a stream of headlights of cars plowing down a country road through Iowa cornfields to come to this small baseball field. Now, Kevin Costner didn't worry about the implications of traffic, public safety, or security, the impact on waste management, sewage, water, all those kinds of things. He just listened to that voice that said, "Build it and they will come." And so as we go forward in this, and I'm not anti-controlled development, but it is something that, in my opinion, we can't do in isolation. We can't afford to say, okay, we'll expand the size of warehouses. And then when someone that wants to build a warehouse comes along and says, okay, I want to do it, approved. And then 2 months later, someone else comes in. I got it, approved. Someone else comes along, and before you know it, the cumulative effect and the stress on our city becomes something that we're not prepared and can't handle. I think most of us in Madison know that 10 years ago we identified a need for a third ambulance in the city. We had a non-compete contract assigned, we couldn't change it, and by God, 10 years later, we just awarded a third ambulance on a part-time basis for $250,000. So things don't move rapidly. We can't change things. I just asked the council members and those that approve this request, it's not just traffic. It has much broader implications. And quite frankly, I don't want a park and ride zone on I-20 heading to Atlanta as we begin to become the metro Atlanta, which we've already become, according to Annie. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak for the change?
Jim Halloran, 512 Hillside Road. I just want to support what Steve said briefly about Field of Dreams, since I'm somewhat knowledgeable of baseball. I'd like to borrow a quote from Yogi Berra. "No one goes there anymore. It's too crowded." And that can work either way, but you got to take that into consideration. People from Atlanta are escaping traffic. They're not driving, they don't want to drive into it. So be a little bit careful with this decision. Thank
Did
you.
you sign your name on the, when you came up? I would ask you to
Oh,
sign, but
sorry.
Jim Ballard.
tell them for the records. Is there anyone else here to speak for this text amendment change?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Rick Crown, live at 382 East Washington Street. And I would echo what my predecessors up here have said. Again, I think the reason we're all here is knowing how wonderful and special Madison is and Morgan County and wanting to keep it that way. And appreciate the work the staff has done to try and both allow development in a reasonable way without destroying the beauty and the many good things we have. Without trying to repeat what was said much better before I arrived here, the thing that struck me in reading through all of the submissions on the agenda and the document packet were the concerns from developers as to what this is going to cost and what it's going to do to them. And it took me back to early days on the Green Space Commission when we had the brazen temerity to ask that developers actually plant trees in the parking lots of the grocery store that they were building. And the representative told us, no, it's cost too much. It's gonna we'll lose the parking spaces. No one's gonna come there. Yet we're gonna lose the deal. And it was like, well, yeah, that's what we want. And the next meeting, he came back and said, good news. They decided they could plant some trees. Business has a place. We all gotta have business, gotta work. But it's also, we don't wanna wreck what is here. So that's as best I can say. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak for this text amendment change?
Hi, I'm Mike Becker. I live at 460 Academy Street. I moved here 5 years ago because I didn't want to live in Atlanta anymore. I moved here specifically because it was a beautiful town, just the right size, and didn't want a whole lot of extra growth. So that's kind of my background and where I'm coming from. I think one thing we should consider is the recent award of the Wheelhouse project for, I think it was $368,000. That's going to go a long way to helping us with development on a smaller scale rather than the giant big box things. So just wanted to mention that and throw in my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak for?
I'll be quite honest, I don't quite understand what you're doing. I don't live in the city, I live in the county. Tanya Beckler, I live off of Old Mill Road in the West Morgan area. What I do care about is clean water and water for our children to play in and water for us to drink. And I'm not hearing anything about water other than 100,000 gallons stipulations and requirements. So I looked at the 2023 water plan from the Northeast Georgia Regional Council, and I'm just concerned that Morgan County is limited by water. We don't have a reservoir in Morgan County, so we're not water rich. Every drop in Morgan County should count, including our groundwater and our surface water intakes. And I think we've got, I think I read 3.6 million gallons a day is what Madison can treat and distribute. So everything outside of that is coming from wells. And the distribution is not going to be going out to all of these places outside of what's already ran for water and sewer. So I just am concerned that I'm not hearing a lot about water in Morgan County, and we need to protect that. So I know you've got a surface water intake on the Appalachie and a surface water intake on Hard Labor Creek for 3.6 million gallons. The 2050 population was only going to be a 5,000 person increase. So if you're going to confine industrial and do the light industrial, I think it's a wonderful plan. And all I'm hearing is wonderful things. And I come from Newton County, and I heard you guys have Aaron Wadley now. He was a wonderful asset to Newton County. So I think what you're doing is good based on what I've read online and what you're doing. I do want you to consider water because the county also passed just recently a $250,000 investment in protecting farms. Well, those farms need water, and that's 3 million gallons a day that the farms are going to need in Morgan County. That's a $500 million industry annually for the farms in Morgan County. So let's hear a little bit more about water for the city and the counties. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else here to speak for this text amendment change? If not, that part of the hearing is closed. We'll open up now for those who are against this text amendment change.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Wilson DuBose. I have a hoarse voice, which I apologize for, but I'm here on behalf of Rooker and Associates. They have owned 170 acres of property since since 2000 and I believe 4. And it's the property that's right across from the Public Safety Center on Highway 83. They bought the property with the blessing of the city at that time. And that's what the city was doing. They were trying to encourage people to come and bring industry and higher paying jobs and a better tax base to Madison. And all we ask is that the city keep in mind that Rooker and other property owners who may be speaking tonight bought their property with the intention of developing it as the city said they could develop it. And if the proposed ordinance passes in its current form, that will be basically a betrayal of what was reasonably believed to be the case by Rooker in 2004. I want to read, just very briefly, a letter from Mr. Rooker, who could not be here tonight but wanted to be. This is John Rooker. He said, "I wish I could be here in person tonight to address the proposed zoning amendments, but I want our recommendation read into the record because Rooker recognizes the importance of having an ordinance that benefits the community as well as those who have or who plan to invest here. To respect the time given for public comment, I want to summarize the email I sent to each of council members last week, and I have copies of that if you would like to see those again tonight. We are asking you to consider the following changes to the current proposed amendment. 1, building size. The current proposal is to cap an industrial facility at 500,000 square feet. We ask that you remove the cap and evaluate each project on its merits as opposed to metrics such as building size, employee count, number of dock doors, or parking spaces. The current draft
20
allows
seconds.
you protection based on, I'm sorry?
20 seconds.
Okay. Allows you, I'm sorry, I've lost my place now. The current draft allows you protection based on traffic counts, which appears to be your main concern. Number 2, general warehousing. We are asked that general warehousing be a permissible use
Time.
in I-2 zoning. May I have another 30 seconds to 1 minute, Your Honor? Mr. Mayor.
That's up to the attorney.
You can, you just need to allow everybody else the same benefit.
So, I would just say this, let others come. If there's time left, if that was 20 minutes, we'll ask you to come back.
All right.
To be fair to all.
Yeah, I understand. I also want to simply reiterate our notice of constitutional challenge that was contained in my earlier letter to the city. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak against this text amendment change?
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Casey Farmer. I'm with Patillo Industrial Real Estate. We own a 323-acre tract of land that's currently not in the city limits, but it immediately adjoins to the south off of Pierce Dairy Road. When we acquired the property in 2008, similar to the Rooker Company when they did in 2004, we were in communication with the city leadership, And at that time, they were encouraging industrial developers to come to the market. And in that, we acquired the property, had it zoned in the county for industrial with several conditions, one being maximum of 500,000 square feet, which by the uniqueness of the property, that's the largest building you could build on that property due to streams and buffers and just the topography of the site. So again, land is unique in itself. We are concerned and with the text amendment changes. We'd like to applaud the efforts of the Planning Commission and staff. They've done a remarkable job, but we do still see issues with this that prevent us as an industrial developer of making investments in this community. Specifically, as a gentleman before me spoke, with conditional use being for the I-2 general warehousing, we typically build speculative buildings, and a speculative building is an investment in a building without a user specified at that time. You build it generically, hoping to entice a company to come and make an investment in your community. If you make a $20 or $30 million investment, it's a tremendous risk to have a conditional use looming over you that a use may not be permitted in there, such as a logistics company of sorts. So the conditional use prohibition is still a critical factor there. We're also concerned with a couple of the other dimensional requirements. Don't understand the need for a lot maximum in an I-2 zoning. Again, we're in the Piedmont region of the state of Georgia. You have creeks, you have wetlands, you have other geographic features you have to work around. So even if the site is over 75 acres, and the building is 200,000 or 300,000 square feet, you shouldn't be limited by being able to develop that because of that limitation. And lastly, I would just like to take the last few moments and just talk a little bit about traffic. We would encourage the city to continue working with the county in its efforts to create a west bypass. We feel truly that's what it's going to take to alleviate the existing traffic issues that you have. Again, our park, we feel strongly, is not going to have truck traffic going along the west side of
20
town.
seconds.
It's going to be exiting onto I-20 and going east to west. But again, just encourage you to continue working with the county with those efforts. Thank you. And the sheet of paper got missing up here, so I don't know.
Someone take the paper with them?
Yeah, the register.
Good evening. Josh Harrison, also with Patillo Industrial Real Estate. I know I sent you all several letters, an email or two, and I appreciate you taking the time to read those. I won't reiterate all those points, and I'll maybe step back and just kind of make a macro point or two in my time. One, it's kind of hard to talk for or against because I think someone said it earlier. We're not against what you're trying to do. We believe in smart growth. As an industrial real estate developer and a commercial property taxpayer in all the communities we develop in, we develop for our own account, and often we end up owning our buildings for 20 or 30 years. So we're long-term investors with people in their communities, so smart growth, we believe, helps protect our investment. I want to expand a little bit on what Mr. Farmer said. Speculative development is the way development gets done today. When I started with Patillo 23 years ago, we were about 50-50 build-to-suit versus speculative. Today, it's 90-10. Our prospects don't have time to wait for the 9 to 18-month entitlement process, construction process that it takes. They're ready to move in 30, 60, 90 days when they touch base with us for their occupancy needs. So the inability to have general warehousing, i.e. not one of the specific uses listed, just makes that investment risk far too great to consider. And so my macro concern for you all is, and it was stated very well by the first speaker, traffic, utilities, and economic development, right? That is what this is about. And the solutions to traffic and utilities, extra sewer capacity, water treatment capacity, developers provide those solutions, right? the traffic studies that staff so smartly put into this require us to make investments in traffic improvements. If you push quality Georgia-based developers like Rooker, like Patillo, to other communities, we'll go to other communities, right? We're already there too. But you push that away, you are taking away the weapons you need to fight the battles that your citizens are talking about. Traffic problems, water problems. We're the solution, not the problem. I talked to Drew Addison before I came up here. When was the last Class A industrial development done in the city? And he kind of chuckled and frankly couldn't answer the question. You have two quality developers who want to do that here, and I ask you and encourage you to think about the positives to your budget, to your balanced tax base, to your traffic improvements that are needed, that developers like Rooker, like Patillo.
20
yeah,
seconds.
We do argue a little bit about the size and scope of those, but we do make those investments in communities where we develop. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak against?
Mayor, I appreciate you giving us the extra minute. I was going to take 2 breaths on this, my entire 2-minute spiel here. But my name is Gene Baldwin, and I'm a 60-year resident of Madison, a resident who feels it's very important to maintain balanced growth, including balance of industry, jobs, and tax base for our residents. I want to make it clear that I am not a fan of Rivian, okay? Or anything of that magnitude to come to Madison. I saw Mr. Clem's comments posted on the anti-Rivian website this weekend, encouraging turnout from the Rivian group, and he made reference to his opinion that we could be headed towards Rivian scale development if these changes are not approved. Sure, we need safeguards, but the strict guidelines as have been proposed here would prevent good, reasonably sized industry that we need and would like. Loading the zoning ordinance with conditional use is not the answer. Conditional use will take between 60 and 90 days to complete. Once prospects and site selectors, Department of Economic Development folks, learn of these tight conditional use triggers, the inquiries into Madison will come to a halt. There was also mention of quality of life in this post. Quality of life factors to many is good paying jobs, close to home, and sharing tax burden with industry. I want these quality of life opportunities for my kids and grands and yours. Over the past 20 plus or minus years, Madison has lost 5 significant employers. 3 of those facilities have been repurposed, but by my count, and there's room for error here, we've lost approximately 500 jobs there. I was a victim of one of those plant shutdowns. I spent 20 years with Dunnan. There's a fact, here's a fact. No new I-2 industry has come to Madison and built new facilities in the last 20 years. Another fact, 70% of our Morgan County residents commute outside the county to go to work. 70%, it's actually 73. Landing employers in our community is very competitive. We're already at a competitive disadvantage in that we do not offer incentives that many other
20
communities
seconds.
do offer. Throwing up these unreasonable barriers to entry will without a doubt cut off industrial prospect traffic that might otherwise consider locating in Madison. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak against?
Mayor and Council, Mike Conrad's 255 North Main Street here in Madison. Always, thank you for your service. It is very much appreciated. As I mentioned in my email, we may not agree, but I hope we can disagree agreeably. So we may disagree here. I am, the statements that have been made on the opposition to this, I absolutely agree with every one of them. We want reasonable growth, and staff has done a wonderful job during the moratorium from the original concept to where it is today. And perhaps there's an opportunity here to delay again to get to that final place where reasonable, good, smart growth in industrial can happen in this community. When I look at Wellington, that's our property that I can share with you, they were going out of business. And that large facility, 342,000 square feet, literally would be vacant given this zoning. Luckily, the city has been very good about allowing flexibility, and what is being proposed is going to remove that flexibility in the future. The statement made by the developers is absolutely on point, that if you do not provide flexibility, the developers cannot come here because you are forcing a specific use for one time. Here again, Wellington. They went out of business. That would have had to have been a conditional use. If they went out of business, then what do you do with the property? Couldn't divide it up like we've done now. Pennington, Mannington, Bard, they've all used our space at Wellington, and it's worked wonderfully for them and for us, and good for the community because it kept jobs here. The conditional use and the way that's applied in our zoning, please take a look at that. You only force one use, and in a larger building, that does not make sense. So allowing all of the permitted uses plus the conditional use for a property in an industrial setting makes much more sense, and I ask for that flexibility as well. So perhaps we need to keep the moratorium in place for a little bit longer, make great progress, perhaps a little longer. If you need to delay it, take it off for one meeting or a half a meeting to allow Bard to have their new development for their property. Sorry to see them leave. They're going to be leaving Wellington when they get their larger facility built. But if that needs to happen, let's do it.
20
Let's
seconds.
not force it. The last comment I'd like to make, and it's frustrating, and it's something that our city manager has done. Frankly, getting the information out to the anti-Rivian crew and not allowing information to come and say, every property owner that's impacted, come to this meeting. That didn't happen. It was only one-sided, and I don't think that's the role of a city manager. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak against? If not, we'll have Mr. DuBose to come back, if you would, to finish your comments.
Thank you very much for your consideration. I'll only be a minute, but I know for a lawyer to say that, that's, people are pretty skeptical about that, but I promise. I want to just finish by making the point that my client has been here 20 years. We're not asking the city to increase the standards, as one speaker alluded to. We just want to maintain the standards that we based our decision to come here on. It's unfair, fundamentally unfair, to yank those out from under us when we've been trying for 20 years to develop that property in the way in which the zoning standards allowed when we brought our property. So we're just simply asking for fairness, and there is no possibility that the current zoning standards, by the way, would allow a Rivian to come to Madison. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sure, you still have a few minutes, yes.
30 seconds, okay. Annie Hunt Burris, 912 Dixie. This is exceptional work. It's been very thorough, very dedicated, but it seems to me, I've never heard of Madison having an economic development plan, and so we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. I would like to ask that this august council, all very dedicated, hardworking people. Every time I go anywhere in this town, I see you up for community events. But if we could have a strategic economic development plan, that would help guide all of our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm Joellen Arts. I live in the county at 1530 Chilton Woods Road in Rutledge. I just wanted to make Mr. Conrad's feel better. This information was submitted on several different Facebook posts, including what's happening in Morgan County, which is a huge Facebook page. Your mic. Plus, it is a public meeting, and it's posted on the city's website. So that's all.
Could you say that again in your mic?
Pardon? Oh, you didn't, I beg your pardon. I said that this notice didn't just go to the Anti-Rivian group. It went to several Facebook pages, including what's happening in Morgan County, which is huge. And I actually received text messages from Morgan County, or from Madison residents, and I'm not a Madison citizen. So there was a lot of publicity, plus what I also said to him was that this is a public meeting and the information is available on the City of Madison website. So it wasn't just one-sided to the Anti-Rivian group.
Thank you. If there are no more comments, this public hearing is closed. And it's back to our council for debate or discussion. So do our council members have any questions they would like to ask staff, I guess, at this point?
Who wants to dive in first?
If I could, Mayor, let me just say I think it's important to remind everyone that the impetus for this effort in the first place, it was really to find a path to manage the attraction of economic development for Madison, but in a way that minimizes the negative impacts on our cities. Because as a couple of you said, we have a unique city here, and we want to make sure that we are doing things in a way that's going to protect what we have. And that's where we get into all the details of how much traffic is too much, and how much demand on sewage is too much. And I think it's important to remember that's why this plan was put together by the planning department, was to address those potentially negative impacts of large development. And there's a lot of arguments. You've heard good arguments on both sides. And at our last public meeting, our work session, I commended our city planning staff for putting a lot of work into this over a long period of time. I also commended our Planning and Zoning Commission for putting in a bunch of work and a lot of hard discussion. And I don't necessarily agree with all of their recommendations, but I want to reiterate that I think we have a plan here that makes sense to me. There's a couple of different buckets we talked about. I don't know, Mayor, if you want to kind of go chunk by chunk. Like I can start with traffic if you'd like. You want me to?
Yeah, how long you gonna be? Because I want to give this council memo
Okay.
an opportunity.
Probably no more than an hour, Mayor. No, I'll try to be brief. That's the extent of my speech. Question on the there's a chart on the average daily trips. Well, first of all, if I'm understanding this correctly, what the planning is proposing is that the traffic be measured by 300 jobs, the creation of 300 jobs, and I guess that's a direct relation to the average annual daily traffic count of passenger cars, and 50 trucks in the AADTT. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is a consideration for you all based on the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation and any feedback we've received since then.
And on the chart, you've got for the rationale for conditional use thresholds, and you've got a little chart there with listing a bunch of companies and their current AADTT. So when I look at the first one, CR Bard, for example, it's got 17 and, well, not that one. How about the second one, or third one, Georgia Feed, 11 daily truck, 40 trucks a week. Which number are we actually looking at? Is it the first one?
You're looking at the first one, yeah. I'm just
Okay.
providing the raw numbers that were given to me by
Okay.
those entities.
So as I look at that chart, there's really only one present existing industrial company in the city of Madison that exceeds that 50 truck threshold. And I might add too, that does not mean you can't have more than 50 trucks, but more than 50 trucks, if I understand it correctly, would require a conditional use permit. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
So out of the existing companies, only Mannington, which is the largest employee company in Madison right now, has 70 trucks per day for the average daily truck traffic. And
I
this
actually
proposal-
think Bard might be a little bit higher in terms of number of employees at the moment. I think they're at about 275 and we'll be going up to
You're talking
325.
about CR Bard,
Not CR Bard, Bard Manufacturing.
BD Bard?
Yes. Or is it BD? I'm not sure.
Okay.
Mr. Joyce, I just want to mention that the number for employees, that was driven by the comprehensive plan. In the last two comprehensive plans, the citizens had expressed the citizens had expressed a interest in smaller and mid-size industries, and then specifically the committee that worked on economic development expressed that in terms of number of employees. And since we spoke to a couple of industries that are working 3 shifts, that 100 number that was given by the public was not an informed number. We think that is 300 if you're running 3 shifts. So that's where the number for the employees came from. It was driven off of comp plan information and feedback from citizens.
Okay. And, you know, as a council member, and I'm sure a lot of my fellow council members up here, if there's one complaint we hear the most about the quality of life in Madison, it is traffic. It is truck traffic on Main Street. It is the volume of passenger vehicles on Main Street. That's probably the biggest source of issues we have. And it seems to me we're putting kind of reasonable limitations on that. We're not saying you can't exceed the 50 trucks more a day, but you need a conditional use permit to do so. I think based on how important that issue is to our citizens, I think is a reasonable approach what planning has come up with.
May I follow up just slightly with traffic, only because very quickly, and I think it serves us to be fully informed. I don't think we need to, skip anything, but I do believe that our engineer, Aaron Waldley, has actually done a study on it, and maybe he could take 2 minutes to give us the overview of what his perspective is, having looked at this. Would that serve?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So there's a lot of things to look at with industrial. As you heard from many of the developers, industrial it's not clear cut. The developments can be manufacturing, they can be warehousing, anything in between. Light industrial can be cottage industry. So it's really difficult to put a number on truck traffic and employee counts. What I and staff looked at was the biggest complaint that we get right now regarding traffic, and that is truck traffic through downtown. And that's the worst case scenario. If we have an industry that parks right at I-20 and all their trucks go to I-20, we're going to have limited impact. It's probably not going to be that big a deal traffic-wise, but if all their trucks go to Monroe or Winder, that's going to be a big deal. We see that from the reverse from Walmart distribution. We have a lot of trucks that come from Walmart through downtown, and it's tough for them to navigate, and then it's tough for everybody else to navigate around traffic lights that are stuck for 3 cycles because a truck can't turn. We've all been there. We've seen it. So I want to say a study may be a little more detailed than how we've looked at this, but what would be an impact that would be noticeable downtown? 50 trucks a day. That's, if they just worked one shift, that's 5 an hour. You're probably going to start to notice a problem. I live right across the street from Georgia Pacific. They have 175 trucks a day. Every time I pull out onto 278, I see a truck. It's coming. Doesn't bother me. It's not a big deal, but there's not that much traffic there. If we see that at these 2 traffic lights, it's going to be a problem. So all we're trying to do is put a bar that triggers a conditional use for the council to then be involved. And then you can look at the details, because all things aren't equal. So staff and I talked about this. When should you guys be involved? If we're getting 50 trucks a day right here, you should know about it. If you're getting 300 trucks a day right at I-20 onto I-20, you have the opportunity to say, that's fine, let's move forward. It's an industry that fits. Also, you can accept an entire speculative development as a council. You're not barred from doing that. All this number does is trigger council's involvement. And I think staff wanted to see a low bar. The complaints that I've gotten about traffic here, what I've heard from all of you about traffic in downtown, we felt that we should really look at that worst case scenario. If all the trucks are heading to Monroe, Winder, Loganville, what's that going to do? It's an easy step to move beyond that. Conditional use goes before the council, and you can move it forward. So all we've done is trigger the council's involvement. Is that clear? Any questions about that? I did present last year a study for you guys about a west bypass. We already have a lot of truck traffic downtown. I think if there's a west bypass in place, we probably have a much higher bar for AADTT. That's not in place right now, so we really have to look at what could happen if we're trying to do something that covers all scenarios, because it's so broad. We don't know what's coming until somebody wants to develop, and so this just gives you the opportunity to engage them when they do. Any questions about that? Anything I can help clear up? There's a lot of art here as much as science, just kind of filling out the community and what would work. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Could I respond to some of the stuff you said?
No. I don't think you can he? No more comments. Yeah.
There was a lot of error there.
Yeah.
I'm going to operate based on that error.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Sure. Go ahead, Councilman.
And I didn't ask Aaron to stay up because I don't know that he's got this answer. And we've got tonight, as Eric said, this was born out of, we've always had and always for years invested in and tried to recruit industrial businesses to help all the things that they help, tax-based jobs, et cetera. And we've got citizen issues to consider, obviously, but also corporate citizen issues. Mm-hmm. And it was brought up tonight that there are some fairness considerations and also some legal considerations by several of the folks from the development side. And generally, I think a conditional use is a good answer when you want to have something that you don't want to say it can't come, but just come to us and this body, whomever it's made up of, and they'll consider all those things. But I heard virtually, I made notes, everyone who spoke on the developer side of things said that is a no-go for what they've bought and invested and held and plan to do with their business. And Mr. Harrison mentioned that developers can be a help in the solution on that. I don't know what that is, but with traffic and other things. But they've all said that the conditional use in today's world, I think one of them mentioned 90% had to be speculative buildings. And the consideration of hope maybe they can offer something where there's a happy middle ground where conditional use isn't required and have to wait. That is a lengthy process, a lot of meetings, a lot of things, but also give the city, like if we can tie it in tightly enough with truck traffic through town or any of the things that we all know nobody wants, including them, light pollution, or water pollution or sound pollution. But if it meets all the criteria, perhaps, I don't know, but there could be another way to do it that wouldn't essentially run them out of business if the speculative building is what they need to do, but still meet Madison's needs.
Would like to make some comments?
Yes.
Sure.
I was thinking, sort of like Rick was thinking, we need to see if we can reach a happy middle ground. But I also speak on behalf of the people that can't speak for themselves. I do not want a building that's really big that will change the landscape of our city. I didn't realize until I talked with Molly that Wellington was 350 or so thousand square feet because of the way that it was built. But I speak for the people that don't have jobs. I know all big buildings don't mean that there will be a lot of jobs, but we need jobs in our city. We have so many people that don't have jobs or can't even afford a home in our city because there's not a job here to help with getting a home. They can't travel outside of the city because their jobs don't even pay enough for them to have a car. So I don't want the really big buildings that are like Rivian. We don't want anything really big that's going to change the landscape of our city. But we do need industry in our city. We do need jobs in our city. We need a lot of things for the people that cannot speak or will not speak for themselves. The ones that come to my home sometimes and say, I'm living out of my car because I can't find a job. So we do need industry, but we need it to be controlled, and not so controlled that we have too much control over what the industry is doing. So I'm looking for a happy medium as well so that we can help with the landscape of our city. But I speak for the citizens of our city. So I'm thinking about the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
It's been very interesting listening to the comments out there and the comments up here. I have some thoughts on it. The truck traffic is going to come no matter what we do. Right now, the trucks are coming up 83 and going through town and going north on, go to 85. And they're doing that because they don't want to go around Atlanta. So they're coming to us. So that's a part of the problem that we're going to have too. We're going to have truck traffic whether we do anything here or not. The only way we're going to solve truck traffic is if the city and the county could get together and do a truck bypass around the city. That's the answer. And I think that the city and the county, and I see some county people here, we need to work together to solve this problem for the mutual benefit of all of our citizens. And not contradicting the tax digest, but I've analyzed that tax digest from one number to another number. And those numbers was what my career was. We're out of balance. We're out of balance. If we don't get industrial development into here to help us with the tax digest, we're just going to have to raise the taxes on the residents. That's pure and simple. And I said that before. If we don't grow in the right way, I have to look you right here in the eye and say, we can't have a standard of living that we want without money. Money. The county's building a new recreation department out there. It's going to generate a lot of additional sales tax. We're going to see more people coming to town. We're trying to work ways to compensate and work on that. And as to the issues with water, don't think we haven't looked at it. I've analyzed that 2 to 3 different ways. There are programs and processes in place right now in answer to your farmers needing water. Wastewater treated can be reused to water farmland. You don't have to use fresh water. Plus, wastewater has to be treated to the specifications that it can be released into the spring or the river. So we need, and I've been working with John, we need to start analyzing different ways to grow. And that's what we got to do. We got to grow the tax digest in order to maintain the quality of life that we want. Because if we don't have the tax digest, we're not going to have the quality. If we don't have the money to pay for things, we're probably going to have to start scaling down on the services that we can provide. You know, that costs money. So we need to work together, and I echo Carrie's comments. I would like to see us pull back a little bit, because you guys have done a great job. But I think we could look at it a little bit differently and talk to these industrial folks to see, you mentioned that they're willing to cooperate to help. Let's analyze that. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Council member.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. To your point, Carrie, if I may, we actually, well, the official record is that we are almost at 100% employment. That doesn't count. Now, I understand that there are people that have fallen off the whole employment cycle, so they don't even get counted as unemployed. So I get that. But we are close in Madison to 100%, if not we are at 100% employment. The thing is this, I'm reminded of the time when Rivian was first planning on coming with the subsidies, and some of the subsidies included salary subsidies. It also included the number of workers that were going to be, and I don't remember what it was it 800 or 900 or less? But I do remember speaking with the president of Rima Tip Top, who was very concerned about that industry coming in, and concerned about the workers that might have been being poached from his business. He was already concerned that he wasn't being able to find enough employees. We already know from, was it Bard? Bard, that is already now is having trouble finding employees. So not to say that's the reason to not bring any more industry in. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we do need to find a balance. Even as Molly, when she was presenting earlier, we were talking about small and medium industry that fits the character of our town, not major big industry. But one thing we do have to care about, and I know that Mr. Baldwin referenced, losing the industries that we've lost in town. Again, we are at 100% employment, but the thing is, what we have to do is how do we preserve? What do we do to preserve the industry we have? And if we build too fast too soon, we can run into trouble as well of running some of the companies out that have been here for a very long time. And the other thing I wanted to mention about the tax base is that our industrial tax base, we're at 54% industry. And so that's pretty reasonable. I mean, we're not in the tanks like, in fact, Social Circle. So how much tax base do we want to be industry? Again, I'm not arguing that we shouldn't have industry here. I think it needs to be reasonable. I think it needs to match the character of Madison. I think it needs to, be very, very thoughtful and considered. And I think conditional use can help with that as well. If there is an industry that can come in for 500,000 square feet that meets everything else, then that's fine. But I think that the council needs to be able to, have a look at that before it just comes in willy-nilly. That's rather dangerous. Two things I wanted to say real quick, if you don't mind. First of all, just as an aside, I keep hearing from our esteemed city attorney when we here at the council talk about doing certain things, and you always tell us that we can't encumber future councils. Do you remember having that conversation with us over various topics?
Yes, it was this council cannot bind future councils.
Okay. My only reference to that is is with the lovely Patillo people that have a great piece of property out there, and I know you've been marketing for this complex and that sort of thing, but I'd get a little nervous when and I think that this might imply about being encumbered when you talked with the city councils 20 years ago about your intention to be annexed. Regardless if I don't think we can be held to what that council promised you. Would that?
That's correct, and any future council beyond you all cannot be bound by what you all do right now either. So I mean, it's
And I'm not saying I oppose it. I'm just saying it sounded almost like it was a done deal because we already talked to the council. So there is that, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the hard work from our staff and fabulous expertise. And the only other thing was I just was wondering if we needed to know more about utilities and the concern for utilities, and maybe our city manager could address that, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much for the question. I will bring that up, but I want to bring up a point, Mr. Mayor, if I can, a point of personal privilege. My name has been mentioned twice in this meeting. I won't get into the first gentleman, but I have too much respect for Mr. Conrads. One thing I know about Mr. Conrads is he's a man of faith and a man of truth. Facts and truth matter. You got up at this podium and said, I posted something on social media. I don't post things on social media. I answered an email from a citizen. Now, you can disagree with what was in that email. People can disagree without being disagreeable. I stand by everything that was in that email. It was also mentioned tonight that I favored one side or the other. I've never refused to communicate or meet with developers or anybody else. As a matter of fact, Mr. Conrad, you might be surprised that I was blocked from a meeting with a developer and a member of this council. When I found out that someone in this audience was going to be meeting with councilors, I said to the councilor, I'd like to go to the meeting. Maybe I could learn something, or maybe I can impart something from my experience. Maybe it would be productive. I was blocked from the meeting. I was told that if you're there, we are not going to have a meeting. So I've never blocked, and you know better than anybody else, Mr. Conrads, I've had 10 or 12 meetings with you personally about another business you own. I've supported you by getting hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional assistance or whatever. So it just shocks me that you would get up at a public meeting and accuse me of blocking communications or being unwilling to meet with anybody. And the third comment is that I was out there trying to promote attendance at this meeting. I had a call today from someone that very much supports your position, and I said, you know what you ought to do? You ought to come to the meeting. This is Madison. We welcome everybody. I'm very well aware that some developers sitting right in front of you don't live in the city of Madison, don't have property in the city of Madison. They are welcome in Madison to attend any meeting that we have and spend as much time as they want to express their opinion. That's the philosophy of the city. So if I'm being accused of reaching out and telling folks on all sides of the issue that they're welcome at this meeting, I plead guilty. Now to get to the issue the question that I was asked, which deals with utilities. First of all, I'd like to join others on all sides of this issue
and recognize our professional staff. They've done an extraordinary job. Monica and Molly and Aaron Wadley, they're some of the best in the business, and we're very fortunate to have them on our team. They take their responsibilities seriously and believe in fairness. Through this lengthy process, we have witnessed a great deal of discussion, meetings, hearings, debate, received any number of pieces of correspondence, interviews with members of the council, hearing from people on all sides of the issues. But to your question, Madam Councilor, the issue of utility, projection, and planning is critically important. Staff needs to know what we're planning for. And when this council decides to annex, when this council decides to change zoning, or when this council decides to allow uses without any stipulation of the use of utilities, then it goes right to our issue of capacity. And Mr. Councilmember Latham is absolutely right, and he's talked to me many times that we need to be proactive. Several things that we've heard tonight, I think we should take to the bank. One is that we need an economic development plan, and we don't have one. We've heard people say, we need jobs. Well, how many? How many jobs do we need? How many present and future residents are going to be underemployed? Where's the plan? There is no plan. And much to her credit, staff member Callahan has been a forceful advocate for implementation of an economic development plan so that we have a goal and we know what we're going to do. Now, the original proposal that staff drafted suggested that we have a threshold of 50,000 gallons a day, and that if an entity was proposing more than that, that they go for a special conditional permit. That has been changed in the spirit of compromise to 100,000 gallons a day. But if we're just blindly going into this, not knowing what the use is and what their capacity request is going to be, we're going to find ourselves without any additional capacity. Now, citizens of Madison have already bought those plants. They've paid for it with their rates. They believe that we have planned appropriately for their uses, not new uses, not annexation, not zoning changes or whatever. And as Mr. Latham says, those things are going to happen. We should plan for them, which we haven't done. The message from staff is we need to be proactive. You don't let things happen and then figure out after the fact what you're going to do about it. And so I think that the original recommendation of staff for 50,000 gallons a day, which would then trigger a threshold for a conditional use, is justifiable. But I think in the spirit of compromise, after hearing input from members of the development community, their recommendation is that be raised to 100,000 gallons a day. But at some point, there needs to be additional review, and that's what all of this is about. At some point, you need to stop and say, wait a minute, let me better understand what's being proposed so I can understand the implications. Growth is here. We all know that, Mr. Mayor, and it's going to continue as it should and will. But it must be managed and planned for. Just this past month, I have worked with no fewer than 4 local businesses who have been convinced to expand their business, creating over 100 new jobs without any noticeable impact on the community. Working with local businesses who want to expand is the most effective economic development strategy, but it's only one small part of a strategy. We know that there will be new proposals that will be considered, as there should be. What the request before you seeks to do is to give you, our local leaders, the tools to properly review a proposal to make sure that it benefits the community and does not detract or damage our city. And I'm in total agreement with Councilmember Blanton that there might be a need for additional conversation about how to minimize impact recognize how you don't critically impact development, but also take care of the concerns of the communities. And ours is a greater burden to bear than in some cities, for we are charged, all of us are charged, with protecting some of the most unique, charming, and beautiful areas in Georgia, and in fact in the country. Rutledge and Madison and Bostwick and Buckhead and unincorporated Morgan County are all so very special. But for too many cities across the country, some I have personally witnessed, when proposals come forward, a quick approval is the easy route that is always taken. You see, saying yes is always easier than saying no. Impacting specific people like we have here tonight who are sitting right in front of you is always harder than saying no to protect future residents who aren't here. Always a city, so I can tell you, because I've watched local officials over the past 40 years, and we have good, decent elected officials here that care about the future of this city. Every time, though, I go to a meeting, a conference, whether it's in Georgia or it's nationally, the response is always the same. You're from Madison, Georgia? That place is unbelievable. Morgan County is really special. We've heard that we should support economic development because we need the jobs, but we don't know how many. We need an economic development plan, like Monica says. It's not part of our plan yet, and it needs to be. And we've heard that we need to subsidize the residential tax base. Have we evaluated this to come up with a plan, as Mr. Latham just mentioned? What is our goal for the proper mix of commercial and industrial? In other communities around the country, we hear that when there's a need for more business growth to subsidize the residential tax base, you often see a present mix of maybe 6% or 8% or 9% of the overall tax base being commercial or industrial. And where does Madison sit? Our present tax base is 54% commercial and industrial already. And how does that compare with some of our neighbors? Take Conyers, for example. Now, Conyers is a wonderful town, but many of you would say, we don't want to become Conyers. Excuse me, Conyers. But how do we compare? Conyers' commercial industrial mix is 64%, 10% more than us. What is our goal? I don't know. Monica's right. We need and so is Ann Burris. We need an economic development plan. And we are blessed to have quality developers who are here and are decent neighbors who want to develop their property. We should support them when we can. But this proposal asks for proper review. It's so easy to say yes, and it's so difficult thereafter when residents say, how could you have allowed that to happen? There's got to be a mix here, a compromise that works for the development community and for the city as well. And that is the position of staff, to try to find that middle ground.
Thank you, City Manager. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. Our city, I believe, just spent over $500,000 to purchase a fire truck. This fire truck was purchased for us to have flexibility if a building was more than 3 stories high. And sometimes we have to look and compromise. And I've listened to all our developers tonight, and some bought the property years and years ago and hope developing their property. And I'm sure any property owner in here on this council, if you have property in the industrial part, you would want your property developed as well. I think it's been a long, thoughtful conversation with our planning and zoning board, and with our staff. And we often say that this is a bedroom community, and we want our community to stay a bedroom community. But we have to grow. We have to grow. I heard someone said that our tax base was fine. And for those who have $500,000 homes or more, that's fine. Council Mayor Pro Tem Reed said that there are people who are struggling in our community who can't hardly afford to pay their taxes, and our taxes are going up. So we have developers in our community who wants to help us make our tax base better. And what better way than to do that than to have industry to come in to help us fulfill that responsibility. Don't put it all on our citizens, but let business come in and help us with a better tax base. And I believe we can do that as Madison. But we gotta grow. We can't stay the same size. And I would ask my council tonight, and we've heard several proposals, and I'd like to ask my council tonight, let's just don't make a decision and on the $500,000 cap. Let's have a meeting. I think we have a chance for another meeting, Mr. Attorney.
You can call a meeting for whenever you want to, Mr. Mayor.
Call a meeting, and let's see if we can strategize and come up, someone said, don't cap it, I think we need to cap it. But can we come up with something that will benefit both our developers and the council and our citizens? And that way, I think it'll benefit all of us. I think I just heard our developers say, and I'm just going to ask the developers tonight, are you in favor of the text amendment except the square footage on the property and the industrial? Are you in favor of the text amendment except the square footage of the buildings?
Mr. Mayor, I think
Yes.
that's sort of inappropriate to ask.
All right. But I think if we could come back, if the council is in favor, let's see if we can come up with a solution. Can we do, Molly? Yes.
I was just going to add, I don't think it's just the square footage maximum in I-2. I think it's the conditional use thresholds that are of concern as well for the development individuals in the room who are representing development interests. Those would be the two main, not that there aren't others, but I don't think it's just the I-2 building square footage maximum and acreage maximum.
So, would our council be in favor of that, or would you want to make a decision tonight?
Let's
Go
think
where-
about it again.
Wait a minute, Derek?
We've been at this for 4 months. We've had numerous meetings by planning and zoning. I personally have met with a number of developers. I've gotten many, many emails. I think I understand their position. I think I understand the position of a lot of our citizens here. I personally don't see the benefit of putting this off any longer. There's probably some details in here, Mr. Mayor, that we can't agree on tonight, but I think there's probably a number of them that we can, and I'm reluctant to throw this back. We'd have to renew extend the moratorium for the third time, fourth time. I'm not even sure the legalities of that. I mean, I don't need personally any more information than I've gotten over the past 3 months myself. Maybe there's a couple of things that are still kind of vague in my mind, but the majority of the items, the traffic, the utility controls, the building size, and the buffers, I'm ready to move on. I will add too that just kind of in the spirit of compromise, because I understand the importance, even though we are at a 54%, that's not out of balance, Mr. Councilman Latham. That's not an out of balance number. Over half of our tax revenue comes from industrial and commercial already. Maybe that's not enough, but it's this total imbalance we're talking about. But I was going to suggest that we, in return for accepting a building size limit, that we would cut the buffers on State Route 83 from 100 feet to 50 feet as kind of a, just to show kind of compromise. Now that's just one proposal. I'm ready to discuss this and get it and get it moved on, but that's just my point of view, Mr. Mayor.
Any other council members have any other concerns?
Mr. Mayor, I haven't heard any of the developers who are here expressing concerns that have said, just vote on something. We need it voted on. Betsy proffered last time in the last meeting that perhaps it could be something that could wait if needed. She may feel differently. She may feel she's got the information she needs, but I don't see any harm in giving an opportunity to. We've addressed what the biggest concerns are, and I'm sure there are many, but the conditional use seems to be one they all are saying they can't. That handcuffs them, the building size, and some of the buffering down south of 83 seem to be the biggest. But I see no harm if staff and the council want to wait and see if any of that can be addressed, and if it can't, then it can't. But I don't see a need to just make a decision tonight. And I'm normally not one to kick the can down the road, but.
Any other council member?
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Sure.
I know we talked about conditional use and square footage and traffic and buffers. I don't see a reason that we have to make a decision tonight. We talked about a compromise. We talked about a happy medium for the developers and for the citizens. I would like for us to have a happy medium. Betsy, I know you talked about we were at 100% employment. Can you give me exactly what you mean when you said 100% employment?
Let's see, I got that from, who was it planning? No, hang on. Oh, I know, it was Christine McCauley, who's been doing the survey of the city. And so I would have to, I can get back to you on that. But let me also say that, even John and I were talking about the pipe, this is a side topic, but we need a pipeline from like the schools. But at any rate, I can get that to you. I don't have it right this minute.
So you're saying the businesses are at 100%, they're full?
They are hurting for helpers. They're hurting for work.
Okay, but my question for that is, how many of those employees are from Madison, Georgia, that are in these industrial businesses that are already here? I'm concerned about Madison, Georgia, and the ones in Morgan County that don't have a job. We may be at 100% employment, but are they from Madison? Are they from Morgan County?
I think that means Madison.
You think so?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not like, yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
No, that doesn't just mean, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
That doesn't mean Madison. All the jobs that are here are 100% full. I know, Betsy. Just a real quick note. I'm kind of like Carrie here. Gene put out a number that 75% are going out of Morgan County and Madison to work. I think that's a little high, but I do believe it's around 55 to 60%. So why are they going out? Go ahead.
I can tell you why they're going out. And Molly and I are having a sidebar over here about it because there's a conflation of housing. You got to remember that when you did the tour just recently of BARD, 100% of their employee force commutes from out of Morgan County.
Yes.
And they're doing that because they can't afford the price point of housing here. Now,
Yes.
that's one of the reasons. So there is some conflation between workforce housing and workforce development. And so we have to tweeze those out as separate issues. But tonight, what we're looking at are really kind of the thresholds at which you want to participate in the industrial decision-making. And so we're trying to get y'all to focus on those specific thresholds, if they rise, we've done our best to give you the middle ground in that third slide that Molly showed for each one. We're happy to relook at it again. We're happy to take another shot at it and see if there's other areas. The only thing that I would add that we also had a sidebar on is that we tripled the number of permitted uses, or tripled the number of uses in the use list. If y'all want the conditional threshold to go away, which is one of the things you heard out of the development community, or if you want to raise it where it triggers at a higher point of any of the thresholds, then we need to hear that as planning staff so we can go back and evaluate if we need to pull some uses out. Because one of the balancing points for us was if we're going to introduce this extra layer of the council's participation, then we wanted to give the development community a larger range of uses. So we might, if you're asking for balance, if you take the conditional threshold up or you remove the conditional threshold, we're going to want to go back and look at the land use list because we opened it up very broadly. So we're looking for your direction. If you're sending us back to the table to work on middle ground stuff, that's one of the pieces we need to hear about because we'll reevaluate the number of uses in the table. I think that's important to us. And then the other thing I want to say that I wanted to add is that the city manager is working on development of a CIP and has given us money for an economic development study. Both of those are known, needed plans for our community. And I think that those are things you'll see in the next 16 to 18 months. Those are things that we are anticipating needing. But the utility numbers were given to us by the utility department. Molly and I both know that we have neither the expertise to write the economic development plan, nor do we have the expertise to provide the utility numbers. The CIP and the economic development plan would be outsourced. And so those are things you hire experts to come in and they can provide those numbers and sources of employment data and all those wonderful things. So we recognize our limitations, but what we've given you is the compromise scenario, and if you send us back to the table, we need that to come with directions. What to look at, what parts of the development argument were reasonable, what parts of the citizens' concerns you'd like to see us reserve and hang on to. So if you could give us direction, we would be very appreciative.
Mr. Mayor, I want to thanks Monica. Yes, housing is a problem, workforce housing. And the governor has a program going that we can work on helping to solve that problem. And you're definitely right. The housing is overpriced here for the money. You're definitely right.
I want to be clear, I didn't say the housing was overpriced. So
What?
I don't want to make the real estate community mad at me, but I do want to say that for the jobs that are being recruited, the housing price points that are commensurate with those job hires. If
Yeah.
you look at the price point for the Rivian hire, and I'm not saying this is Rivian based, but you look at their price point and you look at housing stock for those employees, and it's not a Madison problem, it's a Morgan County problem. It's both Madison and Morgan.
It's a Georgia problem too.
Yes, sir, it is. It's a nationwide problem.
Mr. Mayor, if I could make a quick comment, I'll be brief. I just wanted to push back a little bit on the idea that someone like myself who thinks maybe we should put some limitations on the negative impacts of industrial development, that does not mean I'm opposed to industrial development. And that's kind of the implication here that we're getting, that if you want to put in reasonable limitations on the downside of large-scale industrial development, that you somehow are opposed to industrial development. I'm looking at this list here. We're a town of 5,000 people. We're a fairly small town, and we have companies like C.R. Bard and Godfrey's Feed, Mannington Mills, Pennington Seed, Rima Tip Top. They're all sized appropriately for our community, and the negative impacts are relatively small. That to me is the kind of economic development that is good for Madison and good for this part of Morgan County. And I see nothing, I don't like being categorized as someone who's opposed to economic development, because I'm not in favor of having large, huge buildings and a lot of needs for sewage treatment and a lot of negative impacts of traffic in our city. I just want to kind of push back on that. There's plenty of room for economic development in Madison, plenty, and I just think the sizing of it makes more sense for some of the companies I just mentioned. Those size companies fit very well for us. The Rivians and the 750,000 square foot buildings, maybe not. Well, I don't want to get into details. It sounds like we're probably going to be delaying again anyway. But thank you for allowing that comment.
Sure.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
I know, bless your heart. Just very quick, I want to say this. I mean, you're right, Rick. I did initially think it would take more, but after working and studying and reading and looking at all the letters and taking in all the information and talking with staff, quite frankly, and also looking at just the amount of work that's gone into this. We have asked staff to do this. They did it. We went to planning and zoning. They hammered that out over 2 or 3 sessions, 2 sessions, three sessions of planning and zoning. And then we show up here, but and then we had our work session. I mean, you know, I'm sorry. I do feel personally like, to be fair, that we are kicking the can down the road, or we just don't want to make the hard decision. I don't know. There's been so much work put into this. And then we turn it back to staff and we say, thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for taking all the input from council, from planning and zoning, from input from the developers, input from the citizens. Now, what does that look like? Once you put that all together in the pot, what do you get? And then staff comes back and says, well, here's our considerations. Here's what we get. So they've already done the work. It's gone through the mill so much, and now it's come back out. I can see that some of it can be tweaked, including making a change on the buffers, making a change on the size of the building that doesn't trigger conditional use. BART is about 350. That could work. I mean, we could see 350 happen. But the fact that how long are we just going to keep hammering this out? I feel like, you know, all that information is there. And like you, Eric, I mean, I'm totally for interest. I think it's very exciting. I will say this, and of course, this is, for me, it's very simplistic, so forgive my simple approach to this. But when you talk about conditional use, setting you back 60 to 90 days before, you know, you can do anything, I'm like, what? How long is it going to take to build the industry, get the things going, get the contracts, get everything built to begin with? How is 60 or 90 days that big of a deal that ensures that the city of Madison absolutely gets what it needs? It doesn't get more trucks. It doesn't get the kind of industry that will damage us environmentally or else otherwise. And then I think, I'm sorry, it seems ludicrous to me, forgive me, but for example, a worker that's been sitting on that property for 20 years, so you've been sitting, and that's great, and I look forward to seeing how that gets developed. It's very exciting, but you've had the property 20 years, and now you're saying, oh, we can't bear 90 days for conditional use. It just doesn't. I mean, we all have to go through there's certain burdens to responsible development, and we're just asking, you know, we'll both, you know, shoulder those. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. This time we'll call for a vote. Those who would like to approve this text amendment, we need to get a second, a motion.
You move to approve it, or do we want to?
Those who would be in favor, can say yes, and those who are not in favor.
It's just ask for any motion, Mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Need a motion to approve?
Mr. Mayor, would
Yes.
you mind if Molly reminded you what your options are at this
Yes.
stage?
Great. So just as a reminder, the proposal itself is static. It was issued on March 7th. That's your red line document. If you were to say approve as proposed, that's what you would be approving. You can approve as proposed with changes, conditions, clarifications, whatever you want. You can approve as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. That would be what you see in the minutes that I provided, and there's a red line / blue line document there that incorporates not only the proposed amendments, but also their recommendations. If you said approved as recommended by the Planning and Zone Commission, that's what you would be approving as a whole. You can also approve that with changes, conditions, clarifications. You can approve certain sections and deny other sections that you feel perhaps are not ripe for consideration at the moment and want to come back to those at a later date. You can deny everything as a whole, and then you can postpone to a date certain.
One thing I would ask is if you propose to table it to a date certain, staff would very much appreciate the sections of the ordinance that you find problematic that you would like us to work on. And you could follow up with us on why you think they're problematic and how you would like to see them individually go. But we would really appreciate you kind of circling the spot tonight and saying, here's what we want you to work on, because we feel like we need direction if we're going to take another snack at it.
Okay. I think, to me, at least 3 other councils concerned were the development, and maybe it's going back to the size of the building or the square footage.
I definitely heard the conditional use thresholds,
Yeah.
and the size of I-2 specifically, perhaps. Those have been the two that have risen, I think, the most to the top.
And I would say also the fact that the conditional use is a barrier for investment, period. And so that maybe, that's one of the things I heard that Rick was kind of tweezing out. That's one of the other things that I would look at. So not only where do the thresholds kick in, but the thresholds kicking in, maybe there need to be a higher threshold for permitted. And of course, building size.
Yeah.
So, what,
You know, when it comes to conditional use, I would, I would love to have a by right limitations that don't have to come back to the council. I mean, I don't want to have to be deciding on all these conditional use items either. I would like to get numbers here in an ideal world, which is probably not going to happen, but in an ideal world, have numbers that developers can by right do up to that limit, and then that's it. But that's not the world we live in. I mean, conditional use is problematic, I agree, Rick. I mean, I don't want to be up here having to hash out those things with everyone that's exceeding slight limits, but I'm not sure we can come up with a number that's going to work for all of us. And Mr. Mayor, if I could, is it just 2 of us that seem to be prepared to move forward at this point?
It looks like it is,
Well, then
Councilmember Joyce.
Probably, it seems kind of pointless to put a motion together with all the various amendments that I had in mind if the majority wants to table it anyway.
if I may, though, it sounds to me like there are probably a couple pieces we could get out of the way. If we could make a motion to approve the utilities and the traffic, those would be two blocks that then council, that staff would not have to
I would push back and say, actually, those thresholds are the very thing that you all are not certain about, if I'm not mistaken. That note 1 of table 8, it includes Sarah Title III, it includes 300 jobs.
What the conditions apply to.
Right, it's just what those thresholds are. It seems to be almost the center of your discussion here, as well as the I-2 building square footage maximum. So I don't know actually that you could make a decision on that tonight, because it seems like there aren't a majority of people who.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I just want a clarification on the 3.
Turn your mic on.
If I could.
You might.
They can hear me now. The 300 jobs is on one shift, right?
No.
So other words, if you got a 3-shift operation, you can only have 100 on each shift? I always thought when you had the traffic done.
Yeah, I mean, it's 300 total. So, and again, that number can change. That's what we've proffered to you all. If you feel it needs to be increased, decreased, or not exist,
And then
that's
you
up to
multiply that by 2, I think, Ed, to make the average daily traffic number? Is that how that works?
Well, It may not be here, but in most places where I've worked, it was per shift. Because your traffic the traffic we're talking about is over an 8-hour day. So you got 3 periods of 8 hours. And that's the way it's always been. Other places, it may not be here.
So maybe our traffic engineer might have an answer to that? If we can, Mayor, is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, so we would, when you're talking about the daily traffic, it is the daily traffic. We don't know what the shifts are, so that whoever does the traffic study for that development, they have to program out whether they're looking at 3 shifts or 1 shift. From staff's perspective, we have to just assume the worst case scenario, which would be all that's in 1 shift, 1 8-hour period. That's where we look at 50 trucks a day is a 10% increase on trucks coming down Washington Street. That would be a worst case scenario. If it's all within an 8-hour period, if that's in a 24-hour period, it works out. But it's hard with the way industrial works, with 3 shifts sometimes, with 1 shift sometimes, with 2 shifts sometimes. It's hard for us to look at that with some definitive numbers now, because it's one speculative building may be 1 shift, and then a new tenant moves in. Now they've got a 3-shift operation. So we just look at the daily traffic, and it's programmed per unit. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. Just have to make some assumptions.
And Ed, I would add to that is that staff looked at the things that the state measures for looking at size of industry and what we're trying to recruit. And we're never going to be out there counting the trucks that are coming out of a site, and we're not going to be out there counting how many people are on a shift. That was just used as a figurative number to get to where we were doing. It's always going to be based off of measures that are easily obtained. And so when our businesses pull a business license, when they pull that business license, they declare a number of employees. Whether they run 8 shifts, it wouldn't matter to us. So we're looking at numbers that are readily discernible. Square footage on the tax base, number of jobs that they declare that they have that are full-time jobs. That doesn't include any full part-time. And the other 2 things that we can count that are on DRI thresholds are either we can count parking spaces, which we did not like because we know a lot of people do shift work. And why should they have to build for the largest number of people if they're only running 100 in a shift why should they have to build 300 parking spaces? So you can either do it on parking spaces, traffic, or things that we can readily discern from business licenses. And so we tried to choose things that would be easy to discern whether the trigger was being tripped. Y'all can raise that too.
Yeah. And I want to be clear that it's 50 AADTT. That's not number of trucks. That's the
Number of
It is
cars.
number of
Cars?
Not number of vehicles.
correct, but number of truck trips, not number of actual trucks. Yes.
So truck trips.
Yes.
Coming and going to the site.
Yeah.
Molly, am I correct, though, that as we talk about traffic, and we talk about utilities, and we talk about building size, all 3 of those have a conditional use component to it if they exceeds these limitations, is that right?
It's and or, right. So if they
So-
exceed any one of these, it would trip to a conditional use. They don't have to meet all of those. They don't have to exceed all of those.
But my point is, if we're having discussions up here about the merits of conditional uses, I'm not sure we can make an agreement on traffic, because there's a conditional use component to it, as is the building size and the utility use. If everyone's concerned about the conditional use part of it.
My concern, Mr. Mayor, was just hearing our corporate citizens' issues, and again, balancing it, of course, against our citizens and all of us, those of us who live here and want to enjoy it as it is. But if a building, and I brought this up last meeting when we couldn't discuss things, but if a building were 500,000 square feet and it fell into compliance in the traffic and in the water and sewer and in all the criteria that we place, what would be the need for conditional use if it fell into that.
Well, it wouldn't. If they don't exceed 500, if that's what you choose for your I2 max, if they don't exceed the 100,000 water, wastewater, the 50 AADTT, the 300 jobs, or Sarah Title III, and it's a land use that is permitted, that would just go through land disturbance and building permit.
So what we're trying to encourage you to do is figure out where you think that reasonable threshold is.
Yeah.
It may be 750, it may be a million square feet. We
No,
used.
but it's not square feet.
I know,
Oh, okay.
right. But we used existing industry as the model. And so if it's a lot bigger than what we already have, we set a trip trigger on it.
And most of our existing industry isn't out at the interstate like most of this is. So I see a difference perhaps in what we have now and compared to what might fit.
Right, so there's one undeveloped land, piece of property north of I-20, and the rest is speculative south of I-20, say for Conrad's. I-2, yeah.
So and I think you said you need a cap, and I think the developer would also can agree. We're trying to compromise, and they should be able to compromise with the city as well, you know. So I think if you come back to us with a compromise, something between 500,000 or $1 million.
What?
Okay, so
I'm
that's
sorry.
size of, that's square footage, so that gives us
Right.
something. But then there's also the conditional use thresholds, the AADTT, the number of jobs, water and wastewater. Does that go up? Does that go down? What goes up? What goes down? What is too much? That's for you all to decide.
And if you need us to bring in, Aaron commented tonight on traffic. If you need someone to come and comment on utilities other than John, then we can provide that information. If you want us to take a look at where the honest to God truth is the development community would appreciate having no triggers and no conditional uses. And what we're asking you to do is tell us where that reasonable line is. I mean, Eric drew that point and said, where's reasonable limits? We're asking you to help us to discern which things that we need to look at that are not reasonable.
And I will say, the Planning Commission took 3 meetings, and they were very deliberate about asking for additional information between those meetings for them to be able to make those decisions. So, for instance, a lot of what you see here for rationale was developed as a response to what the Planning Commission requested of staff. So if there are additional industries you want us to look at the AADTT and AADT of, if there are other types of thresholds that we haven't looked at here, we're looking at local thresholds and state thresholds. If there's another type of threshold you want us to look at to kind of compare between what we proffered and what these other entities, organizations, governments are doing, we can absolutely bring that information to you all if you feel like that it's necessary for you to make that decision. We can to look at dimensional requirements of all of our industrial sites. If you want us to tell you square footage of building, lot size, setbacks of every single one, we can do that. I mean,
If it's less than 50, it wouldn't be that
yeah.
hard.
So it's just it's a matter of what information you need from us to make that decision. We can throw out a number of, say, a higher threshold, conditional use threshold, but that might not be meeting your need.
So when the planning and zoning had that meeting, so that anyone in the planning and zoning meeting ever said anything more than 500,000 square feet
That,
of
no.
a building?
So for the Planning Commission, the 500,000 square feet, there were some that were in favor of potentially going a little higher, but they all agreed to that 500,000 and felt comfortable with that number specifically. I will say the conditional use thresholds, we did have one dissent who felt that the conditional use thresholds were a little too expansive from what the Planning Commission recommended, so.
And I believe it's only Mr. Conrad's Wellington building that comes, if I'm correct, it comes close to that 500,000 square feet now. I think that property is
And Bard with their
actually like
expansion will come up.
250,000. Does that sound right, Mr. Conrad's?
342,000.
342.
And Bard
So-
will go up to 325
so
after their expansion.
This would be considerably bigger than our currently biggest if we did 500,000. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but just so we know what we're talking about.
I'm sorry, I'm not I-2, just
Yeah.
for clarification.
Yeah,
I don't fit
yeah.
Yeah.
in what you're considering.
So, but again, if my fellow council members are concerned about the conditional use component of it, as a lot of our developer friends have expressed concern about, all the things that I was gonna propose do have a conditional use component to it. You know, whether it's traffic, utilities, building size, they all, we set a number, and then if you want to go higher, it's a conditional use. So if you're all concerned about conditional use, then I'm not sure what benefit there is going forward at this point.
We either.
I reluctantly admit.
Our staff is talking over there, y'all trying to.
Working through things.
We're just.
So it sounds like that there are at least 4 points that we believe that y'all are focused on. And they're real close to Molly's original points in her, where she asked you to focus anyway. So we think we know where you want us to focus. And we believe that we can, if you will table to a date certain, we will try to tweeze some of those things out. By what you haven't focused on, we actually know which things pretty much have some consensus. And so I think that we know what not to touch.
Okay, good deal. So, when is our next council meeting? When is it? August the 12th.
Mr. Mayor, I think the more important question is, when does the moratorium run out? And I will ask Monica and Molly.
I think it's the 8th of,
When the moratorium runs out?
It's
8th
August
of
8th.
August, I
August
think.
8th.
So can we extend that to August the 12th?
Not tonight, because this is a specially called meeting. It wasn't on the agenda, so you cannot add agenda items tonight. But if you wanted to call a meeting, not tonight, for the sole purpose of extending that moratorium, you could.
So how much time do y'all need?
We can be ready for the August 12th meeting.
That you're ready, but would you say we can't extend the moratorium to August?
Yeah, but we've got the we have the moratorium expiring on the 8th.
How about Thursday, August the 1st? Would y'all be ready Thursday, August the 1st?
I would suggest, if you want to hear it before the moratorium expires, I would go until the very end, so August 8th. If you want to,
August 8th?
yeah.
So, okay.
And I'll remind you, Mr. Mayor, that's not staff not being compliant with what you're asking for. That's
Right.
also giving both the citizens and our corporate citizens the ability to look at our drafts, and so we can post those. Yeah, we need to have time to post those online so people can see them, and, but they're not, we're done with the public hearing process, so they won't get to comment again, but they may
correct. No,
want to comment to you as legislative people outside of that spectrum.
Yeah, two things, Mr. Mayor. The public hearing was closed, so
Right.
your delay of it is just to vote on it.
Right.
The second thing is, if you believe you need more time than August 8th, it is to call a special meeting before August 8th to extend that moratorium till when you and the council feel comfortable voting on it.
Okay. Is everybody good for Friday morning, call meeting on Friday morning?
Wait a minute.
To extend the moratorium to August 8th?
Well,
That
August
wouldn't be
8th is a
necessary.
Thursday.
It-
You're
Want to
talking
extend
about
it to
August
the
8th?
12th?
It already goes to August 8th.
Yeah,
You-
to extend it from August the 8th to August the 12th for our next council meeting.
You cannot do that tonight, so you
Yeah,
need to
we're
call.
right.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
asking if
You
we
need to
have
call a
a call
special
meeting.
meeting sometime this week or next
Uh-huh.
week to extend that, if that's what you want to do.
I mean, I'm good for a call meeting on Thursday morning, if you guys are.
August 8th.
We can do it this coming Thursday.
I think the mayor is on a different page, Eric.
Yeah.
He's looking for a date to call to extend the
Extend
moratorium until the
moratorium.
12th. You're looking for a date on the 8th, just to go ahead and have the meeting on the 8th, which I have no preference either way, but
Well, that way we could deal with this theoretically and not have to extend the moratorium.
Right.
Right. And
There's a-
if
there's a
staff
benefit
is
to
ready,
that.
if staff will be ready for August the 8th, and I thought Marlon said they may need August the 12th.
Staff can be prepared before the 8th or the 12th.
You could be the 8th, okay, so we'll extend it to the 8th.
And that would allow enough time to get the draft to interested citizens and developers?
Yes, sir, I think so.
If city clerk could confirm the date that she would need that.
Did you hear that, Ms. Gilbert?
So the mayor and council's desire is to call it on the 8th.
August the 8th.
Is that gonna be a morning or an evening meeting?
Probably an evening meeting. Yeah, they give everyone
Okay.
chance to be here, yeah.
5:30?
5:30, August the 8th.
If we could just get a confirmation from,
It would need to be posted on August 1st.
Yeah, we can do
That gives a week notice,
and when would you need it, though?
25th.
Okay, the 25th, yeah, so she.
That's in
No,
3
that's,
days.
that's 3 days from now. For our we're just trying to figure out the posting docket, the timelines that are in code, so
Yeah, we don't have latitude, it's
yeah.
ordinance form. It's
Well,
3 days.
I don't,
Are we good for August the 8th?
I
I
don't think that we can prepare something in 3 days and get it to the clerk to meet the posting requirement. 3 days is gonna be tight for us.
Okay. So August the 12th at our regular council meeting.
It
we
sounds
can
like you're gonna need a called meeting
To extend the
to extend the moratorium, and then we'll be prepared and can meet the deadline that Deborah has for the 12th.
Okay.
And,
All right.
and I will just say that I always think it's better for the public when we can schedule our meetings, our big zoning issues to be on regular scheduled meeting dates, because those are on our calendar, and that's good.
And Mayor, did I understand our city attorney correctly in that the public hearing is finished regardless of what
Right.
ever tweakings we're coming up with?
Right.
That's
so-
correct. The state law, the Zoning Procedures Act, allows for a public hearing. I think y'all have heard all the facts, which is why you're making this decision, and it is now y'all's time to craft the ordinance to what y'all heard tonight to make that decision.
Would that include the affected parties, either public or corporate citizens, being able to share information with
Yes.
staff? That
Yes,
would
if you
preclude that?
wanted to have another public hearing, we'd probably need to advertise it again.
enough time to do it between.
Yeah.
No. But they can share that legislative information with you.
Yes.
They can read our document and go and say, hey, Rick, I still don't like this, and I still need for you to voice your opinion on my behalf. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Without a public hearing. I mean, we can hear from them directly.
Yes.
Without a public hearing.
It does put an onus on the citizens and the corporate citizens to go and read the document. That's why we are very concerned about being able to post on a timely fashion. And then they would need to contact their legislator, which is you.
Okay. So can can we meet on Thursday morning at 8:30, council?
This Thursday.
This Thursday at 8:30?
I will be out of town, Mayor, but that's just
right,
one.
you'll be,
I'm in town at 8:30.
And this would just be to extend the moratorium?
right, to extend the moratorium.
Thursday,
So-
the 25th at 8:30, I can be there.
So, can all other council members be here Thursday at 8:30?
I can.
Okay. And Rick, you know what's gonna happen, so we'll be fine. Can you be here? Yeah.
Mhm.
I'll say, so can we get this,
What's your vote?
so,
Can't say it's a specially called meeting.
so do we need to table this until our next regular meeting?
There needs to be a motion to table
table.
it to the August 12th meeting, if that's
Okay,
what
get a
you all
motion
want to do.
table this.
I
So
so move,
moved.
Mr. Mayor. I second.
Okay. Motion and second that we table this text amendment until August meeting. All in favor, show of hands. Opposes? None? Vote unanimously. Thank you so much.
Now it's public comments.
That is, this meeting. Are there any public comments tonight? Yes, sir. Are you gonna comment on?
Yeah, just public comment is,
You gotta sign in, Mike. No, I'm just kidding.
sorry.
Ignore me. Been a long-
Mike Conrad's, 255 North of Main Street, second time. Thank you. I love the process that you're going through and you're working through to get the best product. The frustration, I'm sitting back there thinking, here we go again. The work is being done here or planning commission here and here, and the developers, the corporate citizens, haven't had an opportunity to meet directly with staff in a group to be able to say, here's our concerns, here's the compromise that we're all trying to find. And that's my frustration, is that we're not, it seems like we're out of the loop. And we're gonna be back here again at the next meeting telling you what we don't like again, and you're gonna, I mean, we're in a loop. So I'd love an opportunity to meet with staff as developers, just to say,
Can they
here's
do
our
that,
concerns.
staff?
And this is,
What's your?
it sounds like we can't do it legally.
So, Mr. Mayor, what I would say is that Molly has been very diligent and taken tons and tons of phone calls directly from the developers, and then consistently asked them to frame in writing their concerns. That way we can look over those. We don't consider those any differently than we do the citizens that are concerned on the other side. Our job is fairness. And so we've asked everybody to place their concerns in writing, and that's pro-development and less pro-development, so that we can take this into consideration. But I know she's probably taken 8 to 12 phone calls directly from Gene Baldwin. I mean, Gene, I'm not singling you out. I'm just saying that staff has consistently been a listening force to both the development community and concerned citizens. And we've asked again and again and again, don't just tell us you don't like it. Tell us what you would propose as an alternative and provide that to us in writing. And we've had people do that, so we're very grateful for that.
So can those developers get together and send some information in together? Sure. They can do that?
They've been able to do that from the beginning.
Good deal.
But we're reluctant to meet with a specific group.
Right.
Whether it's pro or anti. We just, that negates our fairness, so we've not done that.
And before we go any further, we do need a motion on the map amendment. Same motion, but for the map amendment. Those are two different hearings. So you
Okay.
actually need to open that up for hearing, and then postpone
They
it.
were trying to go home.
I know.
So we need to open the public hearing. Where did our attorney go? Public hearing again for the map amendment?
Yes. Yes, they're
Public
two
hearing
separate
for the
zoning
map
items.
amendment.
You may want to brief him, Mr. Mayor. He just came
Briefly go over what
Jay,
the
we
map
got-
amendment does.
We need to have a public hearing on the map amendment.
And just to very briefly, the map amendment just mirrors that text amendment. It changes C5 to I. It makes no changes to the boundaries themselves. Simply changes out C5 to I and changes the color of it.
But we specifically need you to table it, not act on it, because it's not good without the text. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Mayor, I move we table the
After a public
map amendment.
After a public hearing.
After public hearing.
Public comment.
So we're going to open it up again for a public hearing on the map amendment. Is there anybody here to speak for it? Which I don't think so. Anybody here to speak against the map amendment? That's back to the council now. Eric, you want to make your motion?
Yeah, I move we table the map amendment discussion to our next scheduled meeting, which I believe is August 12th.
August 12th. August 12th.
Second.
That more discussion, all in favor, show of hands. Opposed, none, vote unanimously. Thank you, Molly, for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you, Ken Coker, for
Okay.
realizing that.
No more public comments. We're going to get a motion and second to go into executive session. to
Mr.
discuss-
Mayor?
Yes.
If we could have a 5-minute recess before we vote on to go to executive session for
Okay.
the mayor and the city attorney to speak. That would be great.
Okay, thank you. All right, this meeting is adjourned.